Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our fifth in the series of five Swim Alberta webinars through the course of this rather traumatic period. Obviously, we've called the whole process moving forward positively, and I'd just like to start off, obviously, by reminding people of where we've been. The first three, we were very fortunate to have Dr. Frank Vandenberg with us from the CSI Calgary to really walked us through the pandemic mental health aspects and is with us tonight as well. And we dealt last time with the sort of laying a bit of the groundwork around the foreseeable future. I'm going to continue in that vein. I do foresee us moving ahead with periodic webinars in a more sort of targeted fashion. Perhaps over the course of the next couple of months, we would deal with a sort of age group by age group strategy around technical content as we move through to the post Labor Day weekend period. So that's how I think things might start to roll out, at least from my perspective. Obviously, our ED Cheryl Humphrey will be keeping you up to date along with the rest of the Swim Alberta staff on much more of the risk management and logistical aspects and anything coming down the pipeline from our NSO as well as the Alberta Health Services. But for us, we're focusing more on, if you like, the business of swimming and the technical side of things. So tonight, I did want to again remind you of this diagram that Frank actually showed us. And if we're into this sort of later stage, let's say, of recovery and reconstruction, to understand that this is not some kind of linear, very predictable rate of improvement. They're almost sort of 2 steps forwards, 1 step back, maybe 1 step forward, 2 step back. We're watching this go on around us right now across the entire globe. We've just noticed in Edmonton, the Misericordia Hospital, of course, has been closed because of a very specific outbreak of COVID-19 there. So these type of things are going to happen, and we should become very accustomed to that. And it's part of this understanding of the resilient mindset that we're going to actually have, which brings me to this point, because this is going to be interwoven through the rest of the evening. And I really want to stress this to you. I also want to stress this aspect before I go into this, is that we are all in this together, all of us. And at any one moment in time, some of us are going to be very buoyant, others of us are going to be in a little bit more of a challenging situation, others halfway between or whatever. And we must learn to help each other and also understand that it's not a sign of weakness to ask for advice or help or to be a sounding board, and that we really do have some very, very clear avenues for help that we can provide to one another. But let's start with this. We can do little about what's going on around us in the grand scheme of things, other than the mindset that we choose to approach everything. We can either see it as the classic opportunity, or if you like, a situation that we can grasp and move forward with, or we can take a negative view. We can see it as a threat. It becomes a chore, it becomes a challenge, etc., etc. So this truly is a choice. And in my close to 30 years now of dealing with performance groups, performance actually comes down to choice. Now, we could be dealing with the sharp end of performance at, say, an Olympic or World Championship level, or simply the performance of a club or a group of parents or a group of coaches, whatever it might be, or even a relay team for a club. It's always about choice. You will either do things or you won't. There is little in between. So I really want to make sure as we move through the next slides that we all understand that. And although it's easy to say, it is more difficult to execute, which is why strength in community, strength in having people you can utilize to help or run things by if you don't know, so that we can elevate knowledge, perhaps give you some choices to think about before you make the choice. These are important things to understand about a vibrant community. And I hope over the last 2 to 3 months, you've really seen the worth of having a strong PSO that really affords you a sounding board, strong information that's had a lot of, let's say, jurisprudence behind it and real thought before rushing in, to make sure that you get to a point where you can pull the trigger soon enough so you're not too delayed, but you have a greater outcome in terms of positivism or success. So swimming is returning. It's returning right across the globe. We are inundated with reports through social media, the internet, of various groups and other sports. So it's coming. We know this. The issue is it's not returning in the way of the old, and it won't likely for a long conceivable period of time, but it is coming back. And this is something that we should be rejoicing in. This is something positive. And we should be therefore valuing every opportunity that we are able for our swimmers to get wet, basically. And think about it. But the problem is the restrictions that we're under vary from almost some places on the planet where there are almost none, at least by our conventional thinking. There are others that have very strict limitations imposed, and some that are certainly not even close to opening at the moment. The challenge for us is that this is largely out of our control. It's determined by whatever jurisdiction rules the roost in the area in which you actually live, or controls the facility even. These are things beyond our control, no matter what people might think about lobbying, etc., etc. The reality is not that. Decisions are made either by a science-based approach, using some level of expertise, or at a political level. Simple. So unless you're the person making those actual decisions, you have little control. So you have a choice on that. You can either fester and allow things to become negative, or you can choose to just understand the situation and perhaps problem solve. Now, I perfectly understand the frustration, the fact that people might feel overwhelmed. Certainly, I think, at least for many of our coaches, feeling very fatigued, working overtime with dealing with multiple groups, perhaps on Zoom meetings and GoTo and whatever it might be. And now, perhaps even doing stuff on deck, plus having to deal with planning, plus spending time on the computer, etc., etc. No matter what people think, sitting in front of a computer and watching people alone is extremely tiring. Understand all of this. And today, actually, on the Swimming Canada update, the CEO of Swimming Canada talked about people feeling overwhelmed. And I want to stress this aspect, as he did, is again, as a community, if you are feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling really downtrodden, you're feeling just in a situation of helplessness, for example, as well as the frustration and the tiredness and whatever it might be, and you're worried about a myriad of things, how your swimmers can get back in the pool, the survival of your club, where your next paycheck is coming from, whatever it might be. You have a community behind you. We have the resources to help you. As I mentioned, Dr. Frank Vandenberg is on the call listening in and has been extremely helpful in terms of providing not only yourselves, but us in the sort of back offices with some help and guidance. And we're still here, we're not going away. So I really want to make sure you understand that. If there is any sense of you running into trouble or whatever it might be in any way, then reach out, please. If we look at the dashboard of us right now, what I want to try to make sure you think about is 4 global areas on your dashboard. First things first, what can you start to think about organizing? How can you really start to, prepare relentlessly for whatever is coming next in this immediate time period? Can't think too far in advance. We talked a lot about dealing with small time bites, if you like, and I'll come back to that. You have to understand that it is what it is, no matter where you are, whatever municipality. If Edmonton is different from Calgary, then Red Deer, then Lethbridge or Leduc or wherever it might be, the reality is that is what it's like for you at the moment. No point sweating the small stuff. Think about what you can control Don't worry too much about what you cannot control. Ensure that you have alternatives, plan A, a plan B, a plan C. One of the things we know at the moment in many places, but not all by any stretch of the imagination, but in many we know whether you're going to be in the pool, are in the pool, or not going into the pool, be in the pool between now and say the end of July. And then perhaps you've got an inkling from August through to the long weekend in September. Beyond that, we really have no idea. We haven't really even had an announcement from the schools, the grade school system, about what's happening in September yet in this province. And the difference between maybe the public board and the separate board, or even charter schools or whatever. We have no global understanding of that at this moment in time. And that will have a huge impact on swimming. Just think how at the moment, how it affects cohort thinking. Well, how will that change depending on what happens with schools? No need to worry about that at the moment. We just don't know. What we need to do is focus on the here and now, the small sound bites and the time bites that we have. What I do know is this, for all of us, priority number one for any club, any squad, any training group is maximizing our participation rates, getting as close back to participation in your programming as you had prior to the lockdown, such that the fundamental health of your program is maximized, at least under the circumstances right now. This has to be a priority one. It's got to be wrapped up within our value proposition that we've talked about. So how do you do this? And we talked a little bit about how you organize around elements such as frequency of training. What type of things can you do that are differently? If you do have the luxury of getting into the pool, what does that look like to ensure mass participation? After all, as Wayne Goldsmith said recently, and many other leading sports scientists, coaches, performance directors, you're not behind, you're not losing out. There's no meaningful competition for a long time as yet, and I will come back to that. So the critical thing is, how do we still keep formulating a base? How we keep our participation numbers up? How do we keep people excited about the fact that we are returning to swimming, and that swimming has significant advantages over many other sports? And how do we ensure that that message is sent to our parents and any possible future parents? How do we even conceivably capture or encourage other youngsters to get involved with swimming who might not otherwise? Think about all those young hockey players, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of age, who may not be that turned on by hockey or team sport because of restrictions. Maybe there's an opportunity there. I don't know. What I am saying, these are worth things thinking about. The second one that I want to stress to you are critical relationships. And I am very concerned about this area because we can blow it big time. Number one, as I've said, with our membership, and we talked last time about critical levels of constant and honest communication. Not trying to stretch too far, talking about what's going on here and now, whether you're in the water or not. Across all levels of your membership, from the swimmers themselves, to the parents, to board members, to officials, whomever it might be. The next thing, of course, is with senior management and daily staff at any of the facilities that you might be dealing with. The relationship, obviously, with the daily staff that you see all the time, pretty important. Do they go the extra mile for you? What restrictions are they under? You know, putting lane ropes in and out, whatever it might be. Senior management, who perhaps are making decisions, critical ones, that actually affect you. Are you seen as just being a thorn in the side compared to another user group that perhaps is being a little bit more, let's say, helpful? How can you help? After all, these are the relationships that will go on for a long, long time. People may be in these positions for a long period of time. And since very few of us own our facilities, we might want to be particularly careful. And then what about other user groups? Are you able to work with user groups? Are you perhaps, because of working together, then being able to suggest and help facilities to understand how to perhaps work better, become more efficient? So this is all very important. And from my standpoint, swimming to be seen as leading in these relationships and not simply either being a member or following. Which brings, of course, the aspect of the value proposition. How do we ensure that our membership values us? Carefully. There's been a lot of talk recently about whether or not swimming is valued in terms of club swimming within many of our facilities. Well, I think that's a very careful question that you do have to ask, but understand that you need to have an understanding of the entire picture of these facilities and municipalities. We are one component, albeit perhaps a large revenue stream for many facilities, but we also have to understand the pressure that they're under and the fact that our mission statement may not be quite as congruent with theirs. So how do we bring them around? And remember, the hallmark of great leadership in the end is to get other people to do what you want them to do without committing any of our resources. This takes quite a bit of diplomacy and background work. The long game. Because none of us are going too far in the short term. That is a reality. It is what it is. One of the things I hope out of all this is that we really start to value the water time that we have. Well, I need to be very careful with this, and I'm very aligned with Wayne Goldsmith on this, because what we saw initially as groups return to the water, particularly in the United States, is they went nuts, or in Australia, in fact. And Wayne had quite a few examples of that a couple of weekends ago on a global Zoom meeting. Valuing water time just means that the attention to detail by yourselves as coaches, by parental understanding, and by the swimmers themselves is that the importance of attention, of stroke mechanics, of starts, of turns, of breathing, of feel for the water, understanding every stroke starts to take on a very different meaning than when you have a luxury of lots and lots of time. So don't necessarily mistake quality time as necessarily meaning something to do with intensity of the energetics. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying what you're getting out of that water time in terms of the ultimate execution is the most important. Which then leads to, of course, you and the training program, the product content that you're going to unleash, if you like, or provide to your membership. It comes back to that value proposition. We're going to do this amount of dry land. Why? Because we're going to establish this. This will be augmented and support what we're going to do in the water. Why? Because we've got this soundbite of time that we're going to move the marble forward of our training improvement in these swimmers. Oh, and by the way, periodically, we would do some assessment, AKA at times racing, although assessment isn't always necessarily racing. But you can start to see how all these things intertwine. We talked about last time this, how you can actually put a package together. How are you going to present information to your membership? How are parents going to evaluate, if you like, the cost benefit of actually doing this? You have to present information very differently. You've got to show why the different components are important. And when you've got a particular soundbite, what does it look like in this soundbite? And if you have good knowledge of this next time bite, what might that look like at this moment in time? I really, really do want to emphasize this, because already in discussion with coaches, not only here in Alberta, and also the various performance directors and significant others have been meeting on Tuesday mornings. Dean Bowles in Swim Ontario had arranged this, and we've been having discussions and learning from each other. And one of the things has people been rushing ahead to a future that they absolutely have almost zero knowledge about. Zero, based on what they knew way back a year ago. Okay, a different world, compared to 3 months ago, compared to now, and projecting into the future. And I mean months into the future. It is almost inconsequential. It's wasted time. Just gets people het up, or worse still, establishes unreasonable expectation. So keep your mind focused on the here and now. Small, short time bites, or bites of periods. Okay? I want to truly stress that to you. And I want you to think about this diagram very, very carefully. Very carefully. The classic energy model, many of you may know of it from Krogerus and Schlapler. Are you living in the here and now? Are you living in the here and now? Are you a memory-driven person? Okay, living way too much in the past, not really thinking too much about the now, really as much of the time in the future even. Are you worse than that, even a dream-driven person? There's a time and place for both of these things at times, in terms of how you approach something, for sure. But if you're dream-driven and you're looking to the future, we have no conception of that at the moment. You live a little bit in the past, but you're not really focused on the here and now, whereas we really have to shift ourselves right now to be reality-driven. We must focus on the here and now, one eye on the possibilities. The possibilities, that's where those plans, alternative plans come in. If something happened, are we ready for what a future might look like or not? If you've got a particular group already in the water, what does the future look like as you start to increase that participation of more and more areas of your club, or making room for more and more swimmers? And obviously utilizing the past, because you don't want to lose the knowledge of the past, but not live in the past. You can't change the past, but you can ruin the present worrying about the future. I definitely want to stress this to you, because much of our discussions at times, we fall back into the past, or we provide conjecture out into the distance where we have no idea. Which brings me to this. Last time I showed you sort of these little sound bites, these little time bites. I want to stress that the period from about the second week of September forward, at this moment in time, this is all hypothetical. Hypothetical. We stand a good chance of being able to run forward with a timeline like this, but it's certainly not going to look like, with projections, anything like it looked like last year at this time. So those scenarios are gone for the moment. What we need to concentrate on is, if you have the possibility of either being in the water already, coming into the water of the next little while, of this period of time leading into when we might have our suggested first time trial focus, a little bit of something to look forward to, a carrot, if you like, and a break. And we know why we are doing that break very specifically. It may afford us, in the planning realms of the world, coaches, club presidents and boards, others who are involved, in terms of planning for the future, as we know, hopefully by then, what's happening with schools, what's happening more with facilities. Perhaps more facilities are opening up, and the timetables of those facilities, which seem to change weekly almost, maybe they come a bit more stabilized. One of the things we know, that staffing levels in some of these facilities will gradually be changing quite dramatically as more and more facilities come on stream. And that's to be expected as municipalities and jurisdictions get a greater understanding of exactly how they're going to operate. Remember, we don't operate in a bubble. Classic non-isolationist approach, and empathy, that aspect of emotional intelligence with other groups. Concentrate on what we can control, which is, if we have water time, get in the water, use it appropriately. Build the program. It's going to change. It's going to change. One of the things I did want to suggest to you is, we talked a little bit about the swimmer's time trial passport. So if I go back to this slide, I've given you some windows of where we might simply do things. And it's a very simple approach. We do the work, we get them ready, and we see how we've done with that work, how they've done. And one of the things about doing it in a sequential fashion, normally you do choose particular events and repeat them. Well, I think in this aspect, and I'll go into why, we have an opportunity here to build a little bit of a swimmer passport. So let's seize that. And I'd far rather get information from the swimmers and yourselves as coaches by going racing than by doing necessarily test sets. Okay, I'd rather see us do something that's really reflective. Plenty of time for us to do test sets, and I will always talk to you about things that I will guide you through. You know, I've got a particular bent about not doing lots of descending sets. I'd like to see some best average things. Okay, well, we can talk about that in the future, but right now, let's use something that we all want to do, coaches, parents, and the swimmers, of course. They want to go racing. We're a competitive swimming organization. All we're going to do is steer it a little bit. Does it mean you can't do anything slightly different to this in addition? Of course. I've just shown you a whole week where you could do these type of things. And as a suggestion, because we want to be swimmers as opposed to simply a 50-meter butterflyer, right? Looking at the age groups we're dealing with, we've made the following suggestion, and we've added a few suggestions. One of the things we've done with our summer clubs is suggested that throughout their age groups through the summer, if they're swimming, that they would go after the 450s plus the cumulative total time of those 450s. Well, what we've decided to do, and this was, I think, an excellent suggestion by Kevin Dennis, we actually wanted to give an alternative for coaches of the 10 and unders, rather than simply follow the menu of the 12 and unders. So for 10 and unders, we're suggesting in those 3 points, if they're in the water, if not, what you might then do once we get back into the water in the new season, what you might do in late October and then into December, 50 fly, 50 back, 50 breast, 50 free, and cumulative time. And Kevin has been working very hard on automated reporting sheets that you just fill in very easily, and Swim Alberta will collate all that information for you. The other beauty of doing all this is that we can manipulate it a lot on a number of things, particularly by actual age of the swimmer. And we can certainly go to single age groups so we can recognize more swimmers, and swimmers have a chance to make a top 20 in their age group they wouldn't do necessarily if they were in a combined age group, those type of things. So, and this is, as you know, we've had a lot of discussion about really restoring our own sort of Alberta sort of tag rankings, if you like, and making this a real focal point for swimmers as a target and for coaches to understand how their programs are doing. Last time I did talk about the 12 and unders and the 13 and overs, and we were suggesting to you for the 12 and unders, 200 free, 100 IM, 100 first stroke, and 50 on a second stroke. And then for the 13 and overs, we just sort of lifted that a little bit to 400 free, 200 IM, 100 on first stroke, 50 on first stroke, and a second stroke. Obviously, these would all be short course. The reason why we'd be saying short course is because for the foreseeable future, and as is typical, we all can swim short course meters. I don't know what 50-meter swimming may or may not look like for the future, given the restrictions that we're under. Do not think of this as necessarily a disadvantage. Okay, the greatest swimming nation on the planet, down south of us, for the vast majority of their swimming years, since the beginning of time almost, has swum some kind of short course swimming, whether yards or meters, for huge swathes of their year. So it's not a disadvantage. And after all, when I first started with you, as a little bit of a thorn in the side, I remarked that our starts and turns weren't very good. Well, here's an opportunity for us to really go after those things by swimming short course. So that's my view. The next thing around this is you're on your own cognizance, just in the same way when we put out the 400 free and the 400 IM challenges over the last couple of years. Time it yourselves. It's an element of trust. We've gone down so far a path where we have to have almost finer levels of officiating for levels of competition and ages of competition that just don't warrant it. We have a very, very finite supply of officials. We have to be respectful of their time and energy, okay, and using them appropriately. And so obviously one of the things we're in discussion with that group, as well as our competition calendar review group, is understanding when and where we need this type of officiating. But one of the key things is I want to make sure that our coaches understand the trust we have in them and their membership in conducting time trials for themselves within their clubs, accuracy of timing, an understanding of the requirements to swim the stroke and execute the stroke race and race effectively, okay, within the rules of swimming. Everyone has to ultimately attend to those, but we should all be responsible for that. And at the end of the day, if people do have, say, lax execution, it'll all come out in the wash eventually when we go racing seriously at some point in the future. So I'm not too worried about it right now. What I do want to see is making sure that we have that carrot to go racing, and kids can see it, coaches can see it. This is when we go, this is what we're aiming towards. So you can clearly see where the midterm is and the final. If a coach chooses to do some other events in the same sort of window, knock yourselves out as far as I'm concerned, but these are ones that I'm interested in for the dashboard of how we as a province are going to move forward between now and Christmas. Okay. I've been asked about other things, you know, kicking test sets and all that. Fine, do them. I certainly expect you to do quite a bit of kicking over the next several months for sure. We've talked about the fitness. I know many groups have been doing really good work on dry land and don't have too many aspects about that. I know many of you have been doing running and other large muscle group activities of an endurance nature. I applaud you on this. I really do. It's something we seriously lack. We've always heard the excuses, swimmers can't run and all this. Well, athletes can run. And remember, human first, athletes second, swimmers third. And obviously great Canadians wrapped up in that. I do want to touch on competition, or as many facilities really mean, events. And we've already heard from some facilities that they will not be allowing events until 2021. Already been told that. So no point knocking yourselves against a brick wall on that particular aspect. Does this mean to say you can't have competition within your venue? No, it's just not going to look like what it used to look like. It's going to look like what it looks like right now, what you can do. So there are restrictions, number of people on deck, okay? Cohorts of people in the pool at the same time, etc., etc. You get the idea. So you can either look at this as the opportunity to do competition, or you can see it as a threat to what you used to do. Well, those days are gone for now, okay? Please understand that. The next question, and this is an important one, is why you have competition. Well, we've allowed at times part of our business model to move away simply from the swimmer, and I'm not saying it was never there or gone completely, but often as not, we use it as a revenue generating component. Well, I'm not saying in the future that you won't still be able to do that. I don't know. What I do know is actually you could even do time trials for revenue generation right now, but you'd have to have a very distinct value proposition. What might you do? You might do video analysis, live streamed, right on. You could actually get a whole bunch of clubs to do it, send their video in, and you add to that and you charge for it. I don't know, I'm just throwing things out. What I'm trying to show is that competition will evolve. There will be opportunity. You either shut up shop and say, well, we can't do it, or you will seize the opportunity, seize where there's a gap and do something. What I do know this right now is that if you're in the water right now, you can have competition. Stopwatch, shall you go, swimmers swim up and down the pool as fast as they can, get the time. That's competition. Does it look like the Olympics? No, but it's competition. So it's just a question of adapting, evolving, and understanding what you can control, what you can't, and it is what it is. Okay? I don't want to come across too preachy. We're here to help. I want to throw as many ideas out. And what might work in a particular facility in Edmonton may not work in a particular facility in Lacombe or whatever. Okay, so we might have to do some adaptation. Nothing wrong. Pick up the phone, ask, shoot some ideas. Okay, ask other coaches around you, team up with other coaches of other clubs and start to think about how you can do things. We were already thinking about virtual series of racing in the province anyway, and we will be coming to the table with recommendations from Kevin, who's leading up our competition calendar work group, and others, and our performance development work group, and of course our senior performance coaches as well as listening to others who either host or run meets in the past, and in discussion with Swimming Canada, who have been very interested in the type of discussions we've been having here in Alberta up until now. And I am pleased to report that I think we've been, as a province, from our coaches who have been sitting on committees, to our technical staff, to our ED, that we've been certainly a voice of both reason as well as progressiveness with our NSO. As I come to sort of finish off things before I sort of open it up for questions perhaps, and other elements about where we might go from here, I want to come to this point that Frank really made, and it's very important. There's a number of things in this statement: coaches and club officials as leaders. I think one of the most depressing things that's happened a little bit, and we're noticing it across the country, creeping in not only swimming but in other sports, is that as frustration and fatigue start to come about, behavior sets change. That emotional intelligence aspect, that sort of empathy, the understanding of motivation, the self-awareness, and then, if you like, the self-control of those emotions starts to go by the wayside. And we have to be very cautious of this, particularly if it sort of creeps into the daily training environment, where that frustration, even if it's simply being voiced, will be telegraphed to, particularly to the swimmers, and then perhaps even to the coaches. We've got to try and stay on the even keel. Even if you go home at night and scream at the moon, as I often do, you have to understand how to channel these aspects, and it's important. We've got to be resolute. And as I said again, right at the start, to bookend this talk, is that we're here as a community to support each other. Okay, absolutely. We've had some excellent discussions very recently that I thought showed some superb emotional intelligence, even within our performance development group, you know, where we had some very emotional opinion, but then a realization and a real gathering and coming back with very productive points. It was phenomenal to see under periods that have been incredibly stressful for all. And so I think if we can support each other in that view, nothing wrong with the emotion, nothing wrong with, you know, spouting forth for a while, but we have to do that reflection. Remember that plan, execute, review. And the issue around these sound bites, okay, these time bites that we have, is to execute on them in the way we best can right now, and then review, you know, periodically. Can we improve this? Okay, we're in the pool with this number of people, we're doing this at the moment, this is how we're getting the building, this is how we're working out dry land, this is how we're is it working for you? How can you constantly be better? And then as you get perhaps a little bit of forewarning, although we've seen at times not much forewarning by the powers that be, as things change, are we ready? Have we contemplated, you know, prepare for that level of unexpected, if you like, within your alternative strategies, so that we get a heads up. We know there's going to be a change come September in many avenues. We know periodically every 2 weeks, because of the incubation period, that the powers that be sort of assess what's going on, both from a political level, which may have underpinnings of economic, financial, social, and then from an expertise point of view around the COVID-19 transmission itself. But we have to try and concentrate on the future, what we can control, and then just have reasonable levels of planning moving forward. That's the way it is. Okay, it's neither wrong nor right. It just is. So at that point, I'm just going to say thank you very much for listening to this fifth one. As I said, we've been sending out some materials to try and help you and guide you, including some suggestions around the next macros content of training. As I said, I hope to go into, well, not hope, I will go into more detail in terms of discussion around those elements for you, to give you some further guidelines. This is not to stifle your creativity or handicap you in any way at all. It's just to provide you with a bit of a golden thread from which you can branch out depending on your particular context and situation and the type of swimmers you've got. Okay, so it's just that common ground. You can either push it in one way, you can pull it in another way, or whatever. Okay, so I really just want to say thank you very much for attending. I know Frank and I do a debrief, and I do a debrief with the Swim Alberta staff every day after these particular webinars, and I really thank you for your attention very much. And let me see if we've got any questions coming up. I don't know, Jackie, if you want to take the screen away from me. Okay, I can see we've got some questions. Oh yeah, so Frank has actually made some suggestions to us. He's suggested that really focusing on a number of aspects, how to win, work with what you have, can do, should do right now. Certainly one eye looking at the learnings from the past, but looking ahead in these sort of small bits. Stay in the present. Ask yourself, what is now? W-I-N, win. What is now? A simple mental training tool. I'll say that again. How can you win? By thinking about what is now. Simple mental training tool to remind yourselves and athletes about what is important. Everything from the warm-up, pre-race prep, ready equipment, socialize, recover, visualize, all those type of things. And on that note, I had a conversation with Frank earlier this afternoon, and one of the things he did want me to remind ourselves is that you are also, as the leaders, the keeper of the gate around the policies and procedures of how we execute swim training right now. And I'm literally talking about how we pay attention to the guidelines we're provided by whatever facility in our Alberta Health Services. Because often as not, we're quite familiar with each other in these settings. You know, a coach, assistant coach, the swimmers, and one of the tendencies, quite literally physically, of groups that know each other is that physical distancing is quite difficult. And it's almost that unless you're paying attention to it, we tend to gravitate towards each other. This is why, you know, the visual markers of things on the floor in stores, or I was just down at my local Audi dealer today getting my car serviced, and in the service area, I mean, it was very clear where the line markings were, and you know, those arrows in Safeway and all that type of stuff. But understand that in familiar groups at times, some of these things we're going to have to do could be quite alien, okay, and go against, you know, swimmers being excited to see each other again and getting back in the pool, or whatever it might be. And then the next thing Frank points out is this positive focus. You know, what can and should you do? You know, what do you have? What can you gain? You know, how can you be successful? Why? And you know, what are the success things that you can actually point to? Because they're going to be a little bit different for the next little while. You maybe not swim as far as normal, but can you swim in a better aspect? Can you reward people by saying that that was the best, you know, butterfly I've seen you swim ever, you know, whatever it might be, or you're getting deeper into the 100 meters swimming with this level of competency. So shift the focus towards what are the wins for you and how you can do things. We've talked about setting the challenges in the water as well as dry land, those elements, very, very important. Okay, so I think that is an aspect I'd bring up. Let's see if there's anything else. I don't know, Frank, perhaps if, is there anything you actually wanted to say at this point? Jackie might have to unmute you. Of course, the slides will make available for you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, no, I do not have anything else really to add. I think it's been a lot of information in different ways. I think it's really important to look at these webinars, and this is what I tell my clients. make the information your own, work with it, because that is where it becomes relevant. That's where the rubber hits the road. It's not because I'm telling you, but because you make it work for yourself. And that is what I would aspire to with my clients. And you can take that message, that use this information, work it out, ask yourself some questions, have those discussions with the suggestions that you've been given. And I guess just following up on Steve's suggestion, that if you have any questions about how to do that, or what to look for, then there is support available. And I think that's really important, to just reach out and maybe validate what you're wanting to do, or maybe you're not quite sure on what your options are, and discuss that. And I think that is taking ownership and being proactive about the challenges or the opportunities that you're facing.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much, Frank. That's a good point. I'd like to reinforce. Or anyone, and anyone in a leadership position, the greatest leaders ask questions, and they're not frightened to ask questions. And often the most successful, knowledgeable in an area are because they ask questions. And so, and then as Frank said, it's not always, it may be just to validate, actually, you get agreement. You've asked a question about something that you wanted to know about because this is what you were thinking of doing, and you can come to consensus, as opposed to perhaps someone comes up with a different idea that you think is maybe better. So I really want to stress that aspect. And as I said earlier, I'm very worried about fatigue in our coaching community, and perhaps in some of our club presidents who have been really working on everything from logistics to budgets or whatever. And I think we need to very clearly recognize that. That's why I'm very concerned about the positive behaviors that we exhibit, and being here to support each other. It's absolutely crucial on that element. And it's not as though just because we're returning to the pool that we're in sort of smooth sailing from here on in. And this is not the case. We will see as many and as profound changes over the next few months as we've seen to date. I see there's a question here from Cecilia. Question: we have a very small group of kids that are following the original recommendations of 2 to 3 dryland sessions of 30 minutes each a week. Is it possible to request something from Swim Alberta to congratulate them or keep them motivated? Cecilia, that is, I think, that's a great idea. And I think, obviously, I think Cheryl's on the call with us. We will have a discussion about that over the next few days and get back to you. But I think that's an excellent idea. And to support you in general clubs, because we know in general for swimming, we've outperformed many other sports, and indeed perhaps even our own earlier expectations in terms of the numbers of kids that have kept engaged. And I think that's a testament to you as a swimming community and the type of creativity you've gone after. And of course, initially it was quite novel. Now we're going to move into a period where this is going to go for an extended period of time, and we've got to really make sure we've got good programs and hooks. So Cecilia, we will take that to heart and have a think about it. Thank you very much for that. Well, as normal, I think there will be a video of this posted. I think Kevin's been working his magic in the background, and Jackie will post this webinar into the series. We will go back to the drawing board, think about what we might do for the next period of time. So stay tuned. We don't want to overload you with these type of things. We want to be very pointed. We will make sure there's lots of lead-in time for when we do these. There won't be any for a couple of weeks. We'll just let things play out. However, this does not mean communication stops, okay? And it's two-way. Kevin and Jackie and Cheryl and everyone, we will be obviously sending out as many prudent and pertinent updates as we can as we move forward. But that two-way communication is yourselves taking ownership and communicating with us about context-specific questions or general questions, whatever it might be, okay? And for all of those of you who have been sending us in what other sports have been doing or swimming around the world, please continue to do that. It helps build our resource base, and we share that through our online resources. But in keeping with everything else, I will sort of bring this to a close for tonight, and I wish you all well. We're just at the end of an email or a phone call, and I really thank you for your time. So thank you very much, everyone. Good night.